Happy New Year to you. Tonight, Kaduna State is under the spotlight again as bandits kill 19 people in Giwa local government area in reprisal attacks. Nigerian military continues onslaught against Boko Haram insurgents, claims troops killed several terrorists in Kotekura and Bulama Isamari areas of Borno State. Ogun State Governor Dapo Abiodun orders suspension of State Commissioner for Environment Abiodun Abudu Balogun over alleged sexual harassment. And India approves emergency use of 2 coronavirus vaccines, prepares to inoculate about 300 million people on priority list. Just one day after 3 persons were killed in Kawaran Rafi village in Kaduna State, 19 others were today murdered by armed bandits, this time in Giwa local government area of the state. The killings and counter-killings, according to the Kaduna State Commissioner for Internal Security and Home Affairs, Samuel Aruwan, happened last night when the gunmen, numbering about 50, stormed the community, shooting sporadically. Mr. Aruwan adds that the bandits also kidnapped and killed one Shamsu Umar, a leader of the Kaya volunteers, while his body was later found after a search operation in the forest. 3 unidentified bodies believed to be drivers in transit from Funtua, Katsina State, were also recovered, while 9 persons sustained bullet wounds and are receiving medical attention at Ahmadu Bello University Teaching Hospital, Zaria. He explains that the troops of the Nigerian Army and police operatives have been deployed to the location, along with an air platform of the Nigerian Air Force. And the military says it is recording some victories against Boko Haram insurgents terrorizing the northeast, with the latest onslaughts on their hideouts, where several Boko Haram fighters are said to have been killed and their hideouts destroyed. Defense spokesperson Major General John Enenche explains that the Air Task Force of Operation Lafia Dole launched the strikes in Kotekura and Bulama Isamari areas of Borno State, following credible intelligence reports indicating that the terrorists had established camps for storing logistics items. He adds that the terrorists were planning to launch attacks on some communities in the state before the airstrikes. According to General Enenche, airstrikes were also carried out in Bulama, Isamari and Bama communities, where several of the insurgents were reportedly killed. We're staying with security. The Dean of the Borno Elders Forum, Professor Khalifa Ali Dikwa, says Nigeria's military needs to be given specific objectives and deadlines within which to achieve them if it is to win the insurgency war in the northeast. Professor Dikwa told Channels Television's Ladi Akeredolale on our current affairs program, Newsnight, that in 2021, the military high command needs to be decentralized for more efficiency and accountability. Professor Dikwa also identified some foreign interests in the rise of insurgency, particularly in Borno State.
Every 1 week or every 2 weeks, I should be able to have results. Whatever report that's submitted to the president should be able to have his own way of checking and cross-checking from the reports. And that it looks like there is no synergy between the agencies, security and defense agencies. Their activities rivalry when they are actually working for this country and they signed to defend the people of this country and the territory. And as a president should be able to stamp his feet to say, do the work, I'm giving you 1-2 months maximum. If you don't finish off this thing, submit your resignation letter. None of us should allow anybody to denigrate our military. But because our military had always been the best in Africa, in all the peace missions in Africa and in the world, Nigeria came with accolades, awards, and so on. But here we are within the country with the excuse that it is fighting within Nigerians and so on. It is not so. It is a war economy. It has to do with hands from outside and then those who are making money within. Possibly the people who are close to the corridors of power. Maybe they are thinking along political lines But in actual sense, when you have insecurity in the country, everybody should forget his own background and feelings. Join the leadership to end the insecurity. That is the correct thing to do.
You can watch the full interview with Professor Dekwa on News 90S tomorrow, right here on Channels Television at 9 p.m. When we look at the year 2020, three major events and issues gripped the country, namely the COVID-19 pandemic, EndSARS protests and insecurity. The National Assembly is constitutionally empowered to provide legislative response to these issues which affected many Nigerians. In this report, our correspondent Linda Kigbe examines the response of the federal legislature to these significant issues in 2020.
Many Nigerians heave a sigh of relief to have made it to the end of 2020, a year which tested the tenacity of Nigerians and was a litmus test for key institutions of government, including the federal legislature. Several events and concerns defined 2020 in Nigeria, but none as significant as the COVID-19 pandemic, EndSARS protest, economic challenges and insecurity. For many, the response of the federal legislature to these issues was critical and forms the basis for analyzing it in 2020. In January 30th, 2020, COVID-19 was mentioned in the Senate for the first time in a motion by Senator Chukwuka Utazi, asking the government to take preventive measures to ensure that the virus does not make its way into the country. Soon after, the leadership of both chambers separately inspected the COVID-19 isolation centers in the FCT. There were several legislative responses by the National Assembly to COVID-19 in the form of motions, actions and discussions with the executive on ways to manage the pandemic.
Mr. President, distinguished senators.
On March 24th, 2020, both chambers embarked on recess to protect lawmakers and staff from coronavirus.
The real challenge for the COVID-19 response is the shutdown of the National Assembly itself, especially during a period where they should not have shut down. Like it's a period where every parliament was trying to work. In different parts of Africa, you find people actually resorting to e-parliament, different form of e-parliament.
We set up committees. That we are not on plenary does not mean that operations, things we are not working, committees we are not working.
Insecurity in the country took preeminence in debates in the Senate and House of Representatives throughout 2020. The upper chamber set up an ad hoc committee to find solutions to the security crisis. But the security crisis persisted, and legislators faulted the executive for not implementing the recommendations in the report. Lawmakers in both chambers repeatedly called for the sack of the service chiefs, and members of the House of Representatives finally resorted to inviting President Buhari to brief them on the security crisis.
In the country. That's why it's a motion of urgent public importance.
The request was not honored.
So the National Assembly has really done nothing in terms of auditing. That's their job. Audit the war against terror. Now what does that mean? That means that you can't do that by simply calling the service chief to come and tell you what they do. No. You have to set up an independent think tank, if you like, to investigate, to bring out reports.
The story of 2020 cannot be told without mentioning the EndSARS protest, which gripped the country and climaxed in the shooting of protesters at the Lekki toll gate and the massive destruction of properties in some states.
After the crisis, with the tragic way it ended, with the Lekki shootings, the least you expect of a National Assembly, what is that it should have called all the actors, carry out. That's why parliamentary inquest. They should be the one. In fact, they should have set up a commission to say, look, inquire into this matter because it's a matter of national importance.
We urge the government of the day under Muhammadu Buhari to scrap SARS it was within 24 hours scrapped. So I don't think there is any other step you would think the National Assembly should have taken, much more than this proactive action.
2020 was a year which saw some government officials go head-to-head with lawmakers.
Because you have legislative immunity, you damage my reputation.
Honorable
No,
Chair.
I will not allow you.
Honorable Chair.
You're a small boy.
You cannot say something and disallow me the opportunity to respond.
I just told you that we have record to show that most of the contracts in NDDC are given out to members of National Assembly, but you don't know about it.
It's okay.
Nigerians will also not forget the National Assembly's probe of alleged financial recklessness in the Niger Delta Development Commission, NDDC, and the drama that followed. Going into 2021, Nigerians would want to see a more proficient National Assembly in its constitutional role of checking the executive, passing important legislations, and demonstrate more commitment in legislative business to support the executive in the management of COVID-19. Linda Akibi, Channels Television News.
Our National Assembly correspondent Linda Akibi joins us now. She's in Abuja. Linda, great to see you and a happy new year to you. Great report, I should say. You mentioned three issues, COVID-19. Sorry, I'm running ahead of you. You did mention three issues in your report, the COVID-19 pandemic, insecurity, and the End SARS protests. How did these issues stand out for you in the year 2020?
Hello, Amarachi. Great to see you in 2021. So it's been a mixed bag of highs and lows in terms of the response of the National Assembly to these three major issues in the country in 2020, which were the COVID-19 pandemic, insecurity, and End SARS. We saw the National Assembly proactive in the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic. As early as January 2020, there was a motion in the Senate calling for thorough screening of passengers coming in from China. We saw the House of Representatives pass the economic stimulus bill. The Senate President and the Speaker inspected the COVID isolation center in Gwagwalada here in the FCT. And then we saw engagements between the leadership of the National Assembly with government officials in the front lines of managing the pandemic. And lawmakers choosing to contribute their salaries, to ameliorate the sufferings of Nigerians. However, there were certain actions, which Nigerians were not so comfortable about. The decision of the National Assembly to shut down an adjourned plenary did not sit down well with many who feel that the National Assembly should have taken advantage of any of the technological platforms, to sit and offer some oversight. And they feel that the country suffered in their absence as there wasn't proper oversight in the management of the federal government's programs to alleviate the sufferings. And this was obvious in one of the engagements between the leadership of the National Assembly and the humanitarian minister, where lawmakers voiced their issues as regards the palliatives, as regards the integrity of the social register. And then we saw after the House of Representatives passed the economic stimulus bill, that bill didn't make any appearance in the Senate and just died like that. We didn't hear about such a critical bill of that matter. We saw how the House of Representatives gave it accelerated hearing. In one day, they passed it through first, second, and third reading, but that bill never came up in the Senate and hasn't been heard of since. And then, Nigerians are wondering why the bill of such, importance. And then there was no amendment of the Quarantine Act. The House of Representatives brought up a bill to amend the act in the form of the infectious diseases legislation. But after the controversy surrounding that law, it did not come up again. So till date, we do not have up-to-date legislation in the country on how to manage pandemics. And then we also saw, in terms of the End SARS, the National Assembly did do lots of discuss the End SARS issue in the country, but in the aftermath of after the shooting, the Lekki shooting at the toll gate, we didn't see both chambers discuss that shooting, and many wondered why the National Assembly did not launch any investigation into the shooting of the protesters at the Lekki toll gate. And even though the National Assembly has said that there's a judicial panel of inquiry sitting nationwide, but many feel that shouldn't have stopped the National Assembly from investigating the Lekki toll gate shooting.
Yes, we have a lot to talk about tonight. Linda, you're paving the way for further discussion of the National Assembly's performance in the year 2020. Thanks again for joining us on the News at 10.
Thank you, Amarachi. And
in part 2, after the break, we have more on our sectoral review of the National Assembly in the year 2020. We'll be joined by the Executive Director of Yaga Africa, Samson Otodo. He joins us after now. Welcome back. If you just joined us, you're watching the News at 10 live on Channels Television Lagos. A reminder of our top stories. Kaduna State is under the spotlight again as bandits killed 19 people in Giwa local government area in reprisal attacks. Nigerian military continues onslaught against Boko Haram insurgents, claims troops killed terrorists in Kotekura and Bulama Isamari areas of Borno State. Ogun State Governor Dapo Abiodun orders suspension of State Commissioner for Environment Abiodun Abudu Balogun over alleged sexual harassment. And India approves emergency use of 2 coronavirus vaccines, prepares to inoculate about 300 million people on priority list. We're staying with one of our lead stories tonight, and for more insights into the performance of the National Assembly in the year 2020, we're now being joined on the News at 10 by the Executive Director of Yaga Africa, Mr. Samson Otodo. He joins us via Skype from the United Kingdom. Mr. Otodo, thanks for joining us on the News at 10. A Happy New Year to you.
Thanks for having me, and Happy New Year to you too.
What's your general assessment of the National Assembly in the year gone by?
Well, I listened to the previous report, and it's a clear reflection of what happened in the National Assembly in 2020. You can't assess the National Assembly without its core functions of lawmaking, of oversight, and representation. If you look at the responsiveness of the National Assembly, I'll say to a large extent, the National Assembly did take actions, legislative actions that respond to the yearnings of Nigerians. First, the response to COVID-19. I think the National Assembly should be credited for the pressure that you put on the executive, ostensibly, disturbed by the lack of the inaction on the part of the executive. The National Assembly took actions in January and in March, and most of the actions taken by the executive in response to the COVID-19 is in direct response to what the National Assembly did. You've also seen the National Assembly engage in populist actions as it relates to defending the rights of citizens. And so to a large extent, you say the National Assembly did respond to the yearnings of Nigerians. However, there are some gaps with respect to the response of the National Assembly. Now, we can talk about that. The second is you've also seen, the National Assembly take progressive steps towards amending some laws in the country. Although what is disturbing is some of these laws are yet to be concluded. For instance, the Infectious Diseases Bill, that's one piece of legislation, the electoral reforms, even though the National Assembly is acting on it and has, indicated to conclude this process by March of 2021. What is, however, disturbing with the National Assembly over the last 12 months, we also saw an attempt to use legislative instruments to shrink the civic space. So you saw bills like the social media bill, hate speech bill. These are draconian legislations, that limit the civic space. And citizens did push back on these legislations. And we're still expecting the National Assembly, to communicate to Nigerians what's the report of the committee and what is positioned on this bill. I think the last point is, if you look at both chambers of the National Assembly, I think the House of Reps seems to be more progressive compared to the Senate because of some actions it's taken. So if you look at the House of Reps, has deployed technology to ensure electronic voting on bills. This is unprecedented. But when it comes to transparency, we're still constituents cannot say or determine the position that their lawmakers take on several policy matters. I think if the National Assembly is keenly interested in transparency, then people ought to know how their legislators are voting on policy issues. And so the National Assembly should be open with voting records on bills, and with also attendance of lawmakers, because constituents need to know. And I cannot conclude by saying that this National Assembly has a responsibility to defend the interests of the people, because some actions that the National Assembly has taken seem to be pandering to the whims and caprices of the executive as opposed to working for the Nigerian people. And if the 9th National Assembly is going to make significant impact, then it must repose confidence in Nigerians that it is working for Nigerians and not working for the executive.
Well, I like that you have itemized and picked up on some of the really important issues, that the National Assembly had to face during 2020. But one issue, of course, is security. And with that came calls for the sack of service chiefs in the country, which has still not happened. The National Assembly also summoned the president to address the Assembly over the insecurity in the country. That also did not happen. So would you say the National Assembly reached its wits' end in 2020?
Well, I think the National Assembly needs to take serious its constitutional responsibility of holding the executive to account. And that function of legislative oversight is paramount to good governance. You have an executive that over the last couple of months, and I'll say years, appears to have disregard for democratic institutions like the National Assembly. So motions and resolutions of the National Assembly are not respected by the executive. And that raises fundamental questions on our democracy and that whole principle of separation of powers and checks and balances. The National Assembly has a constitutional responsibility. It is disappointing that in March, when the National Assembly, particularly the Senate, resolved that the president should address the nation, the presidency responded by calling the National Assembly as an institution that was engaging in populist advocacies and cheap and sensational. And this was credited to the spokesperson of the president. And that's really disappointing. If we want to make progress, then the executive and other arms of government must respect, resolutions and legislations passed by the National Assembly. And how many times have the National Assembly called for the sack and the rejigging of our security architecture? But it appears it's falling on deaf ears because it does appear, in my estimation, that the president does not regard some resolutions taken by the National Assembly. And so the National Assembly has, within its own constitutional powers, mechanisms to put the executive in check. And so they should activate, those provisions in the Constitution that vest powers on them to hold the executive to account. They can't continue to play politics with the lives of Nigerians because we're losing lives on a daily basis. They have been voted into power to check the executive and not to pander to the executive. And so it is important that as we move into 2021, down to 2022, this 9th National Assembly must ensure that they hold the executive to account. Yes, separation of powers is not separation of government, but they have sworn to protect and make laws for the good governance of our country. And so they should live up to that responsibility.
Yeah, and that responsibility also has been placed on them by Nigerians who are also holding them accountable in 2021. We'd love to see a better assembly. Samson Itodio, thank you again for joining us on the News at 10.
Thank you. Always a delight.
I'll make a quick stopover in Ogun State as the government suspends the State Commissioner for Environment, Mr. Abiodun Abudu Balogun, following a viral video of an underage girl who says she was sexually harassed by the commissioner. The state government said in a statement that the suspension of the commissioner is to enable him cooperate fully with the independent investigation being carried out by the police. The statement reads in part, whilst taking cognizance of the principle of a suspect being presumed innocent until proven guilty, and the public statement issued by Honorable Abudu Balogun denying the allegation as a government with zero tolerance for gender-based violence and indeed any criminality, the suspension is a further demonstration of the commitment of Prince Dakpo Abiodun's administration to fairness, equity, justice and the rule of law, no matter who is involved. The commissioner in question is accused of sexually harassing a 16-year-old girl. Up north, the owner of a demolished restaurant said to have been the proposed venue for a nude party in Kaduna State says she is pressing legal charges against the state government for defamation of character and loss of property in the demolished building. The owner of the property, identified as Aisha Mercy Yakubu, denied knowing the person who printed the flyer for the said party and that no prior notice was given to her before the demolition was carried out.
What would be your first reaction if an invitation for a sex party popped up on your phone? For the police, theirs was to round up those alleged to be the organizers of the event.
On receipt of this information, teams of Operation Yaki and policemen from Southern Treasure Division swung into action and arrested the following suspects. Abraham Albera, owner of the hotel, Umar Rufai of number 27 Calabar Street, Casino Road, Kaduna, and Suleiman Lemona of Ajia Street, Southern Treasure, Kaduna.
Responses will most certainly vary, and the Kaduna State government has shown where it stands on the matter, bringing down the property. But the owners of the property feel hard done by, as they say there was no time a party of that nature was to hold in their premises, insisting a prankster set it up.
Fortunately for us, we now saw the number on the flyer, the one that was trending on social media. So they asked us to pay 20,000 naira to track the number, which we did. I gave them 20,000 that they tracked the actual number, and the guy came out. The guy came to the station, marvelous app, one marvelous app like that. And he now said it was just a joke, that it was not meant to happen.
A bizarre case resulting in an action one side feels justified in, while the other seeks justice. While the investigation continues, the owners of the property are left bewildered by the misfortune of losing years of toil to what they say is a bad joke.
The Minister of Communications and Digital Economy, Ali Pantami, has directed the immediate suspension of officials involved in extortion of applicants at the National Identity Management Commission's offices. This directive comes as some enrollment centers in Bauchi and Kaduna are alleged to be capitalizing on the rush for national identification number by the public to perpetrate fraudulent activities, as mobile network subscribers are expected to update their SIM registration with a valid national identification number. Mr. Pantami restated his zero-tolerance stance on extortion, bribery and corruption, noting that such unethical practices, if allowed to fester and not nipped in the bud by taking stiffer actions against the culprits, has the potency of derailing the project. Here in Lagos, there's been an adjustment to the stay-at-home order by the Lagos State Government for civil servants. Now, officers on grade level 14 have been asked to join others from below grade their grade level to work from home until January 18th. The state government had earlier asked officials on grade level 12 and below to work from home to stem the tide of the second wave of COVID-19. The state government is also urging public servants to stay safe and to keep adhering to all COVID-19 protocols in order to rid the state of the pandemic within the shortest possible time. And in Rivers State, barely 1 week after the state government threatened to shut down the state completely, following what it described as total disregard for COVID-19 protocols, the state government seems to have reviewed the threat as it ordered all public and private nursery, primary and secondary schools to reopen from January 4th. A statement from the Rivers State Ministry of Education says Governor Nyesom Wike has approved the school calendar published in August 2020. It, however, directed that all schools must maintain COVID-19 protocols, including the wearing of face masks, the use of hand sanitizers, and staggered classes. But with the rising daily cases of COVID-19 and a huge number of patients in Lagos receiving home care, a spike in infections is resulting in hospitals being overwhelmed with cases, a situation that's causing health workers a lot of concern. Health experts are worried about residents' lackadaisical attitude to non-pharmaceutical protocols in the face of increasing infections, many of which they say result in serious health conditions. Our health correspondent, Mary Alale Yusuf, reports.
In Lagos, as in other places around Nigeria, it's business as usual, with people throwing caution to the wind, not wearing masks, clustering together and generally ignoring every COVID-19 safety rule. Health workers who come in contact with infected people daily wish the public would pay more attention to the rules.
My first 15 patients that I saw on Monday, 14 tested positive to COVID antigen rapid test, and we had to tell them to do the PCR test. And same thing yesterday, the whole place in front of the hospital was quite filled. Out of 25 initial patients I saw, I think about 15 were positive.
It is important to note that during the first wave, every positive case was admitted. But now, home-based care takes care of mild cases.
At the moment, all people who are seen in hospital to admit are all severe. We can take 16 people at a time, and we have 14 people in admission at the moment.
At Palin Memorial Hospital in Victoria Island, new patients visit the triage tent for evaluation. Some of the cases which are eventually confirmed end up at its COVID-19 treatment center in Ikeja. Dressed in our hazmat suits, we proceed into the restricted area. Critically ill patients, all requiring oxygen, lie here. Some of these rooms are double occupancy spaces, and they are all occupied. 2 oxygen cylinders stand ready for a less critically ill patient. The doctor says it's dangerous if the flow stops for even a moment. One is much better and sits in the patient's lounge. Some are not as fortunate. Mr. Michael Chumuba was admitted here some time ago.
I now started having a really bad fever. I started to feel as if I was drowning, as if my lungs were filling up with water. And I started to have really bad pain at my upper back.
Michael was discharged after 5 days of treatment, but took a turn for the worse and was rushed back.
The third stage was a really bad symptom. I was literally suffocating. I couldn't breathe.
For a month and a half after being given a clean bill of health, Michael still struggled with weakness and difficulty sleeping. He says he's okay now, but religiously wears a mask in public, keeps clean hands, and observes physical distancing. Experts say observing these protocols reduces one's risk of contracting and passing on the infection. Mary Alale Yusuf, Channels Television News.
In other news, the Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project, SERAP, has asked the President to direct the Minister of Justice and Attorney General of the Federation, Abubakar Malami, to investigate the alleged missing 3.8 billion naira public funds meant for the Federal Ministry of Health, teaching hospitals, medical centers, and National Food, Drug Administration and Control, NAFDAC. The group in a statement also wants the President to probe the widespread corruption in the ministries, departments and agencies indicted in the audit report released by the Office of the Auditor General of the Federation. According to the organization, the Federal Ministry of Health, Abuja, spent without approval over 13 million naira to organize a 2-day training and bilateral discussion with medical personnel and the Ministry of Budgets and National Planning to prepare 2019 personnel budgets. Over 4.8 million naira was originally budgeted for the program. The letter reads in part, any failure to promptly investigate the allegations and prosecute suspected perpetrators and to recover the missing public funds would breach Nigeria's anti-corruption legislation. We're staying with legal matters. The statistics of crime and criminality in Nigeria appear staggering. Before the end of the Jonathan administration, the Administration of Criminal Act came into effect, which carries some major reforms in the criminal justice system in the country. In spite of all these, there are still major issues of data to track cases of crime, low capacity to investigate cases, it's a major fault of the policing system, and proper investigating tools. Our next report examines these issues and the way forward this year.
Nigerian prisons, now renamed correctional facilities, continue to harbor inmates, most of whom are awaiting trial. Soon after President Muhammadu Buhari signed into law the Nigeria Correctional Services Act on August 14, 2020, hopes of decongesting custodial centers became high. But the situation appears unchanged as correctional centers are weighed down by the criminal justice system in the country. Statistics from the Office of the Attorney General of the Federation show that there are 74,127 inmates in custody in the nation's custodial centers. Out of that number, 52,226 are pre-trial inmates, 21,901 are convicts, and those already condemned. Despite the introduction of the Administration of Criminal Justice Act in 2015, the wheels of justice seem to be grinding slowly.
In most cases, where the investigations are not thorough, the presentation of the cases in court often give rise to a lot of challenges, such that the prosecution will be asking for all manners of adjournment.
There are institutional factors, there are human factors, there are factors that relate to training of manpower, availability of manpower and training of manpower. There's also that of resources, financial as well as material resources.
The Act provides for the administration of criminal justice system which promotes efficient management of criminal justice institutions, speedy dispensation of justice, protection of the society from crimes and protection of rights and interests of the suspect, the defendant, and victims in Nigeria. But the slow pace of justice dispensation in the country, which is attributed to long and sometimes avoidable adjournment of cases, has led to non-dispensation of most cases and abandonment of inmates in prisons. But all hope is not lost for the suspects.
Until you have special criminal courts or divisions, criminal divisions, so that we know that this court is for criminal matters. Not necessarily a new court for crime, but you have federal high court, you have FCT high court, you have state high court. Let there be criminal divisions, civil divisions, probate divisions, and what have you.
The judges are not enough. In a place like Abuja, how many judges do we have? How many courts do we have? Because you're talking about a population of over 10 million. It's a highly active population. So that way,
the judges will hear fewer cases. They can pay better attention to the cases. The quality of arguments before those courts would be robust, and you probably can get justice, better justice.
With these identified lapses in the system, lawyers are of the opinion that the correctional centers, which are meant to be reformatory, are gradually becoming punitive, thereby defeating the essence of sending convicts to prisons.
Meanwhile, Governor Yahaya Bello has advised judicial officers in Kogi State to use their powers as enshrined in the Constitution to ensure positive changes in the dispensation of justice. The governor gave the admonition in Government House Lokoja during the swearing-in of Justice Henry Olushi and Justice Bayo Oluwoshegun as substantive Chief Judge and President, Customary Court of Appeal of the state.
I was born on the 11th of January.
The banquet hall of the Government House Lokoja is witnessing an event before the gathering. It is the swearing-in of the Chief Judge and President Customary Court of Appeal of Kogi State.
To December 1966.
The Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice in Kogi State presents the instruments of appointments approved by the State Governor on July 3, 2020 to the jurists while appealing to them to build on their successes.
So if I would simply say they are round peg in round hole.
Soon after, the oath-taking was administered on both Justice Henry Olushi and Justice Bayo Oluwoshegun, thereby making them substantive Chief Judge and President Customary Court of Appeal in the state.
Protect and defend the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So help me God.
Governor Yahaya Bello says he's confident in their ability to make the judiciary vibrant and active for the people of Kogi State.
Your Lordships, for the period that you operated in acting capacities, you have demonstrated commitment to these same democratic ideals. I have no fear that you will continue to partner with us in observing them for the overall benefit of our state and people.
The newly sworn-in Chief Judge promised to use his depth of knowledge in the legal profession alongside his other appointed colleague in making sure the state judiciary works at all times.
I want to express our gratitude to all these institutions and personalities, star personalities that God has used to bring us to this stage in our careers.
The deaths of the former State Chief Judge, Justice Nasiru Ajana, and former President of the Customary Court of Appeal, Justice Ibrahim Atadoga, in 2020 left vacancies that needed to be filled. And now that the swearing-in of the positions has been sorted, residents will expect to see quick dispensation of pending cases in Kogi State.
And now to the arts. Several sculptors got together at the Thought Pyramid in Lagos. Art Review tonight showcases an exhibition of the best medallions.
Anjorin Dance Metaphor is a group exhibition that features 5 of the finest sculptors in Nigeria that shows the dexterity of metal and the vision that can be derived from scraps and found objects.
Anjorin is an exhibition solely designed for metal-welded artists. I want to use this exhibition to change the narrative that a creative welded artist is different from a regular welder, and also use this exhibition to kind of inspire and motivate the upcoming metal artists that they can choose metal as their choosing career.
Anjorin is a concept that I strongly believe in,
because it brings together the best of the best. I mean, I feel it's a great honor to showcase alongside this great artist, and I know that the story of art is changing gradually, and in fact it has come to stay. And I believe that people would enjoy the series of works you see on display here. They are top notch. They are still the best.
The sculptors in this show can hold their own individually, so coming together, they create magic and turn all the noise that emanates from their craft to a sonorous melody.
When you look at all these artists, you can see there are different distinct styles in them, despite the fact that all of them have basic, almost the same basic nature in the work, using metal.
The next generation of metal artists are watching. So this show is to encourage them with this one-of-a-kind metal sculpture exhibition.
Beyond our shores now, India has become the latest country to approve emergency use of 2 coronavirus vaccines as it prepares for one of the world's biggest inoculation drives, a move Prime Minister Narendra Modi has described a decisive turning point. As comes as global COVID-19 cases exceed 84 million and deaths inching closer to 2 million. Here's a global update. This would be the first COVID-19 vaccine to be approved for emergency use by India, which has the highest number of infections after the United States, and comes in the day the country is running a nationwide mock drill for vaccine delivery. The Drugs Controller General of India said both manufacturers had submitted data showing their vaccines were safe to use. However, opposition politicians and some doctors have criticized the lack of transparency in the approval process. As the UK records its highest daily increase in coronavirus cases of over 57,700 people, the first doses of the COVID-19 vaccine, developed by Oxford University and AstraZeneca, have been delivered to hospitals. Prime Minister Boris Johnson says the country will have 530,000 doses of the Oxford AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine ready to administer on Monday, and hopes to provide tens of millions of vaccinations over the next 3 months. Meanwhile, the U.S. has recorded more than 20 million COVID-19 cases, accounting for nearly 1/4 of global number of COVID-19 cases. Top infectious diseases expert Anthony Fauci has warned the country is already seeing a mutated strain of COVID-19 which will spread. The cases, found in individuals who had not recently traveled, show the likely community spread of the variant from person to person in the U.S.
Cari fratelli e sorelle, buongiorno.
Pope Francis has condemned people who had gone abroad on holiday to escape coronavirus lockdowns, saying they needed to show greater awareness of the suffering of others. Speaking after his weekly noon blessing, the Pope said he had read newspaper reports of people catching flights to flee government curbs and seek fun elsewhere. Finally, Australia's New South Wales state has reported 8 new COVID-19 cases as a mask mandate for indoor settings is being implemented in the country's largest city of Sydney. New South Wales authorities have made wearing masks compulsory in Greater Sydney at indoor venues like gaming room, hair salons, places of worship and shops as authorities try to limit the spread of the disease. Over in the U.S., Vice President Mike Pence has welcomed an idea by some senators to refuse to certify Joe Biden's presidential election win. The 11 Republican senators, led by Ted Cruz, want a 10-day delay to audit unsubstantiated allegations of election fraud. Mr. Pence has stopped short of echoing allegations of election fraud, but on Saturday, his Chief of Staff, Mark Short, said Mr. Pence shared what he called the concerns of millions of Americans about voter fraud and irregularities. Short said Mr. Pence welcomes the efforts of members of the House and Senate to use the authority they have under the law to raise objections and bring forward evidence before the Congress and the American people. All 50 states have certified the election results, some after the recounts and legal appeals. Match day 2 of the Nigeria Professional Football League played across 7 centres earlier today recorded 12 goals, including 1 away victory. David Ebuka and Rabiu Ali handed Pillars all 3 points in the 2-1 win against Katsina United at the Ahmadu Bello Stadium in Kano. Nasarawa United stunned host Heartland FC at the Dan Anyam Stadium in Owerri to pick the only away win in today's fixtures. Rangers International beat Aqua United by a lone goal. Dakada FC recorded their first win of the season, edging out Jigawa Golden Stars 2-1. In other league matches, Sunshine Stars beat FC Fanyuba 1-0. Nobi Stars of Makurdi also defeated MFM FC by same scoreline. Wolves beat Adamawa United by 1-0. Manchester City has produced arguably their first display of the season with a 3-1 win at Chelsea. They laid down a marker of title intent and heaped further pressure on Frank Lampard. The citizens shrugged off the issues of a COVID-19 outbreak within their squad to rampage to a 3rd straight league victory for the first time this season and move up to 5th in the table. The result means City are now just 4 points behind leaders Liverpool, having played a game fewer. Chelsea are 3 points further back in the 8th spot, but have played 2 matches more than City. Fine first-time finishes from James Maddison and Yuri Tillmans helped Leicester beat Newcastle 2-1 and moved to within a point of the top of the Premier League. Defending champion Carlos Sainz has won the first stage of the Dakar Rally in Saudi Arabia early today, with the kingdom hosting motorsport's most punishing event for their 2nd year since its move from South America. The Spaniard, a 3-time Dakar winner, covered the 277-kilometer special between Jeddah and Bisha in his mini buggy in 3 hours, 18 minutes, 56 seconds. Sainz finished 25 seconds ahead of French teammate Stéphane Peterhansel after a gripping seesaw battle which record 13-time champion Peterhansel appeared to have won until Sainz stormed home to deny his celebrated rival. And this just in, U.S. President Donald Trump has been recorded telling Georgia's top election official to find enough votes to overturn the election results. President Trump reportedly told Republican Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger in a recording released by the Washington Post, "I just want to find 11,780 votes." Raffensperger is heard replying that Georgia's results were correct. Again, U.S. President Donald Trump has been recorded telling Georgia's top election official to find enough votes to overturn the election results. And the main news again. Armed bandits today launched a reprisal attack on Kaya community in Giwa local government area of Kaduna State, where no fewer than 19 people were killed. Also today, the Nigerian military said troops continued their onslaught against Boko Haram insurgents after they reportedly killed several terrorists in Kotekura and Bulama Isamari areas of Borno State. That's it on the news at 10 tonight. Thank you for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Good night and stay safe.